When we hear the brand Rolex, we instantly think of luxury, expensive, and timeless. This iconic brand is a favorite timepiece of all wealthy and affluent individuals. For so many years, Rolex has been a dependable investment. Founded in 1905 by Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis, they kicked off the whole Rolex legacy in London. If you want to know fun facts about this brand, watch this video. But first, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button to stay updated. The name Rolex doesn't mean anything. It just sounds fancy. One of the founders was on a mission to find a name that would be catchy and easy to pronounce across all languages. He wanted it short and snappy, especially when engraved on a watch. After playing around with thousands of combinations from the entire alphabet, he had about 100 options, but none felt quite right. Then, one day, he stumbled upon the name Rolex. So, the name isn't some deep, meaningful concept. They just chose it because it's simple and sounds like it belongs to something expensive. It all started in 1905. Wilsdorf and Davis were very interested in putting watches together. At first, they imported parts and did the assembly themselves. But after 3 years, they decided to step up their game. Instead of importing, they started making the pieces themselves. But then, in 1919, they had to say goodbye to London. Why? Well, import taxes were skyrocketing because of the war. Switzerland became the new home base. Smart move, considering it was neutral ground and had skilled workers. Plus, the Swiss are notorious for being a tax haven. Unknown to many, Rolex was registered as a charity in Switzerland as the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation in 1944, after the passing of Wilsdorf's wife. All the ownership shares of Rolex were handed over to this foundation. Swiss law says private charities don't have to spill the beans on their charitable activities. So Rolex keeps its donations on the down low. No one knows if anyone has ever received a charity donation from this foundation. It's all shrouded in mystery. Since a charity technically owns Rolex, they also score some tax cuts. Hans Wilsdorf, the guy behind this move, did this because he had no kids and considered Rolex his baby. So, he made sure the company would live on. Even today, Rolex doesn't have traditional owners or shareholders. They're more like custodians. When you think of it, crafting a Rolex watch is no joke. This is the major reason why these timepieces are expensive. Each Rolex watch takes almost a whole year to make. Despite cranking out thousands of watches annually from their factory, every single Rolex is still handcrafted. That's right, there are no mass production assembly lines here. They've got this unwavering commitment to quality. Each watch undergoes rigorous stress and pressure tests to make sure it meets Rolex's sky-high standards. The testing process is challenging and eats up a lot of time. So it's not uncommon for a Rolex to spend a whole year getting ready for its debut in the market. This dedication to excellence is a tradition that continues today. In case you didn't know, the most expensive Rolex watch is the 1958 Rolex GMT Master, which sold for $3.5 million. What makes this watch stand out is that it's made of 18-karat gold. It had a distinctive bakelite cognac brown bezel, which sets it apart from the usual stainless steel Rolex GMT watches. And get this, it spent 58 years in its original unrestored condition. Rolex isn't just slapping gold on its watches, it has its very own private gold foundry. Rolex makes its own gold and has patents on 3 unique gold blends and a specific steel compound known as 9004L. But what really makes this watch worth $3.5 million is its unique blend of gold, never used again in any other Rolex. It's like the holy grail for Rolex collectors. On the other hand, the most budget-friendly Rolex is called the Air King, and it only costs $2,200. It might not have all the bells and whistles of the fancier Rolex models, but it still gets that signature Rolex attention. Back in the day, Rolex watches weren't as pricey. In 1981, you could snag a premium Rolex for around $900. But 10 years later, that same model hiked up to $2,350. Here's where it gets interesting. They realized that cranking up the price and obsessing over the details worked in their favor. Now let's rewind to 1926, when Rolex pulled off a game changer. they introduced the first ever waterproof and dustproof wristwatch, the Rolex Oyster. Rolex's term oyster for its waterproof models today originated from this groundbreaking watch. When Mercedes Glaetze, the first British woman to conquer the English Channel, geared up for her second swim across, Rolex founder Hans Wilsdorf handed her a Rolex Oyster. And get this, she didn't wear it on her wrist but around her neck. After a grueling 10 hours in icy waters, she was pulled out, half conscious, and guess what? The inside of that Rolex was bone dry. Alright, let's talk accuracy. Because Rolex didn't just dip its toes into the wristwatch game, it dove in head first. Back in the day, on July 15, 1914, when Rolex was still in London, they did something groundbreaking. They created a tiny wristwatch labeled Keyless Crystal 11-line bracelet watch. It became the first ever wristwatch to snag a Class A chronometer certificate. That was a big deal, marking it as incredibly accurate and precise. Now, for those wondering, chronometer testing measures how accurate a wristwatch is. It's like the gold standard for excellence in the watch world. Every Rolex piece undergoes 15 long days and nights of intense testing by the Swiss official Chronometer Testing Institute. In 2016, while most high-end luxury watches chill in the plus to minus 6 range of error, Rolex subjected their entire production line to a plus or minus 2 per day chronometer standard. That's one of the highest levels of accuracy out there. Mind you, Rolex isn't just about looking good. These watches are built to conquer the harshest environments on Earth. After World War II, Rolex's reputation soared. When a British Himalayan expedition led by Sir Edmund Hillary conquered the summit of Mount Everest for the first time in 1953. Despite the brutal conditions and high altitude, every Rolex worn by the team kept ticking without a glitch. Not a single second was lost. In 1960, when the U.S. Navy took Rolex to the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth's crust, sending a research submarine down to a mind-blowing 798 feet below sea level. They strapped a Rolex to the outside of the vessel, and it ran flawlessly, even under extreme pressure. In 2012, during the Deep Sea Challenge expedition, led by filmmaker James Cameron, they attached a Rolex to the outside of the submarine, operated it with a robotic arm, and once again, the watch performed like a champ. If you want to buy a Rolex, always go for the authentic ones. Buying fake Rolex watches is never okay. Choose a more affordable, authentic brand if you can't swing the real deal. Always buy from an authorized dealer to avoid getting scammed. So, how do you spot a fake Rolex? First, check out the second hand. A real Rolex's second hand runs smoothly without ticking or talking. Next, look at the Cyclops lens on the date. A genuine Rolex magnifies the date, making it tough to replicate. If the date looks off, it's a red flag. Lastly, examine the finishing. Rolex pays crazy attention to detail, using top-notch materials. There should be a serial number where the strap connects. Starting last 2000, Rolex embedded their crown logo smoothly where the 6 o'clock should be. Now let's talk about some controversies Rolex was entangled in. In 2008, Patrick Heinegger, the CEO of the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, stepped down for personal reasons. As it turns out, Rolex had a substantial investment in Bernie Madoff's $65 billion Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff, until 2009, orchestrated one of the world's largest investment scams, landing him a 150-year prison sentence. Rolex, along with other companies, fell victim to Bernie's scheme. Despite the company officially denying the claim, it's ironic that Rolex was Bernie Madoff's favorite watch brand. His entire collection of luxury watches was auctioned off after he was imprisoned. However, the auction only managed to raise $600,000. Rolex watch also played a crucial role in solving a murder committed by one of Canada's most wanted criminals in 1996. Albert Walker Johnson, a high school dropout, managed to scam 70 clients out of a whopping $3.2 million through a mortgage and investment scam. Wanted by Canadian police, he fled to England with one of his daughters. Walker started a new investment business in England with another Canadian expat named Ronald Joseph Platt. When Platt moved back to Canada, Walker assumed his identity, even having his 15-year-old daughter pose as his wife to avoid Interpol detection. However, when Platt returned to England in 1996, Walker decided to kill him. Walker might have successfully executed his plan if he had been savvy enough to remove Platt's Rolex before dumping him in the English Channel. After 2 weeks in the water, the only identifiable item on the body was the still-functioning waterproof Rolex. Through service records, the police identified the body as Platt's, and it didn't take long to track down Walker, and he served a life sentence in prison. Here's an interesting tidbit. Rolex is the official timekeeper for the Wimbledon tournament. This partnership dates back to 1978, when Rolex became the official timekeeper of the Wimbledon Championships. Their most prominent ambassador is arguably the greatest tennis player of all time, Roger Federer. Rolex gladly pays Federer a whopping $15 million annually for his endorsement. That's a lot of money. So, how much does Rolex earn? Rolex boasts over a 60% profit margin on all their watches. The raw material costs for a Rolex watch are way less than what you're shelling out. When you buy a Rolex, you're not just paying for metal and gears. You're paying for intangible value, innovation, heritage, perfection that took years to achieve. You're paying for the expertise of the world's finest watchmakers and the time it takes to craft these masterpieces. And let's be real, that level of expertise doesn't come cheap. Here's the scoop on the economics behind a $10,000 Rolex watch. The manufacturer builds it for $3,000, sells it for $6,500, and banks a cool $3,500, or a 54% profit. The dealer, who snagged it for $6,500, added another grand in costs, sold it for $10,000, and pocketed $2,500, a 25% profit. The entire chain generates around $6,000 in profit for that $10,000 watch. And here's a bonus fact for you. There's a friendly battle between two guys competing for the world's biggest Rolex collection title, John Mayer and Mike Wood. Would you buy a Rolex watch? Is it really worth every penny? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification button to keep updated for new videos.